Gambia's Chief of Defense Staff visited the governor of West Coast region as part of his ongoing nationwide tour. The United Nations calls for more support to tackle the growing food insecurity in South Sudan. And China commemorates the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party in a grand style. Well, these and more coming your way on The World Today. Hello, this is Africa TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin. I am Amadou Kante and many thanks for joining us. And now the news in detail. Now, on his second phase of the nationwide military tour, the Chief of Defense Staff of the Gambian Forces, Lieutenant General Yakuba Drame, has paid a courtesy call on the governor of West Coast region. The discussion was centered on the work of the army and how peace could be maintained both in pre- and post-elections. Mariama Cham has more details of that in this report.
The Gambia is going into tough times as elections of presidential, legislative and local government approaches. Many feared for violence as the peace of the country could be fragile in the upcoming elections if any indifferences is displayed among Gambians. In his nationwide tour, CDS Drame has been constantly calling on Gambians to maintain peace as tribal and political sentiments can cause instability in the country. Having been into peacekeeping missions in countries of conflict, the Army General explains how the country could suffer in the hands of civil war if tribal sentiments is given a chance.
Imagine the Gambian situation. What do we have? Gambia is poor. Let's say outrightly poor. Gambia, we are dependent on one AIDS. Assuming there is a crisis in this country, let's say for instance, 2 days into the crisis, how many of you would survive? Let's assume there's a war, civil war, because of senseless tribal sentiments or reckless decision in the context of tribal sentiments. If there is a crisis in any given country, one, all the shops would close. The markets would close. Everything basically would come to a standstill, including transportation. In the Gambia context, how do we survive?
The chairman of the Brikama Area Council, Sirifo Sonko, called on the military to safeguard the peace in the country, saying the military should not allow politicians to use them for their political gains.
The Gambia, men and women in uniform, we are now in politics. We as politicians may want to use you, our sisters, our brothers, to cover us in our politics. You are not there for that. You are there for the Gambia, our country, our beloved nation. And I challenge you to maintain what you have been doing before. We are so much proud of you, and we believe you are going to be loyal to your country. You are going to be loyal to the leadership of this country. Without loyalty, I don't think we will be able to live harmoniously in our dear motherland. The Gambia is known as a smiling coast of Africa.
Lamin Sane, the governor of West Coast Region, says the only way to secure the country is through dialogue and collaboration. Governor Sane adds that there should be no atmosphere for violence instigation in the country.
I've also been following remarks about some sort of sentiments we're observing in the security sector, that is especially on the social media platforms. There should be no room of trying to instigate anything of violence in this country. You are soldiers with a difference. You are soldiers of professional training with high academic qualification. And most of you have left this country to go outside for peacekeeping missions. And those peacekeeping missions, you've learned experiences. You see so many things, and you can tell people about those histories.
With the December polls fast approaching, the political atmosphere is already booming with different political parties emerging to contest the presidential seat for a 5-year mandate. With regards to past experience of the political impasse and other political tensions that has gripped the nation's peace, the Army General deemed it necessary to engage both the military, religious, and the community elders to maintain peace and tranquility. The country's army chief also warned the men and women in uniform to do away with tribal sentiments as it could generate precedents in the Gambia, especially with the tension of the upcoming elections. Reporting for iAfrica News in the West Coast region, I am Mariama Cham.
The chief of course, the chief of defense staff of the Gambian forces there meeting officials of the West Coast region, and including the chairman of the Brikama Area Council, and of course they preach for peace ahead of the December elections. Now, due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, Ugandan government is set to dispense COVID-19 care support to vulnerable communities in the country. The government has recently reimposed a national lockdown to curtail the surging new infections, which have left many people in challenging situations. About 500,000 households are expected to benefit from the support, and the country's Bureau of Statistics is responsible to classify the eligible group. Let's have more details of that in this report.
Hassan Kasiri's van has been packed up for nearly 2 weeks since Uganda went into COVID-19 lockdown. He is a taxi driver in Kampala, but since public transport was suspended, he's not earning a living.
We taxi drivers are not doing well at all. From the owners of the taxi to us, who are employed to drive. The ordinary person is bad off. I call upon the president to remember us, the local people.
Hassan now spends time playing board games with his friends just to pass time. He's among the vulnerable groups who will receive a $30 cash transfer to help him and his family during lockdown. Families are expected to use the money for purchasing food and other household items. But Hassan says it's too little to meet his family's needs.
I beg the president to open up the country so that we can work and take care of our families, because the government will not be able to reach everyone with that money. When will it even reach us?
The government aims to reach about 500,000 households with this relief cash. The money will be transferred to mobile phone accounts. The cash transfers are yet to begin flowing into people's accounts, even when people have been home for close to 2 weeks. Last year, vulnerable groups were given food, but there were concerns that it wasn't enough, and some people missed out in the handouts. A mobile van will also move to communities with cash to hand out to people without mobile phone accounts.
This 42 days vulnerable group is strictly those whom the lockdown measures interrupted their daily work, and their daily work is only when they work that they can earn something to eat.
The Uganda Bureau of Statistics will send teams to identify people eligible for this money. Categories listed include taxi drivers, hairdressers, teachers, musicians, pubs and nightclub workers, among many more. The government imposed a 42-day lockdown on 18th June to try and bring down infection rates, which had surged to over 1,000 per day. Uganda is going through a new wave of coronavirus that scientists say is more deadly. The Minister of Health says the numbers are now going down, but some urgent restrictions on movement are preventing many people from accessing testing centers. And many who depend on daily earnings like Hassan say the government should allow them to work under strict rules so they can sustain their livelihoods.
The Ugandan government supporting vulnerable households as part of course, effort to resuscitate the country's economy amid the impact of the COVID-19, and of course also better the condition of the vulnerable communities. Now, we come back home and report on election matters because over 700,000 Gambians have registered to acquire voting tickets ahead of the crucial 4th December presidential elections, the Independent Electoral Commission has announced. This massive number was registered after 5 weeks of voter registration exercise. According to the IEC, the process is going smoothly and they might reach the targeted number before the stipulated deadline. Aisata Chow has more of that in this report.
The voter registration process started on the 29th of May 2021 and it is expected to last until 11th of July. With a population of over 2.3 million people, only 70% of eligible Gambians have registered their votes for the 2021 presidential election. This translates to about 700,000 voters. The Independent Electoral Commission intends to issue about 1 million voter cards before the deadline. Parmakan Khan, the communication officer of IEC, said the registration process is progressing smoothly and he is positive that before the final week, the IEC will reach its targeted number.
Yes, I think it's going fine. It's progressing smoothly, and right now we are in the week 5 of the process, the 5th week of the voter registration, and it's just in the last quarter of the voter registration exercise. I would say it's going smoothly despite some few challenges we're facing currently. This was the 4th week figures. The figures related to the 4th week. That's the over 700,000. So we expect to receive the 5th week by Friday. This Friday would mark the end of the week 5. So I would say we have 2 more figures left. We have the figures for the 2 remaining weeks. So based on that fact, I would say it's likely that we would meet the target of registering 1 million voters.
According to reports, some political parties and stakeholders have pleaded with the Electoral Commission to extend the voter registration beyond the allocated date. But Mr. Khan believes that it's not necessary to extend the voter registration deadline. According to him, registration centers are less busy and are quite sure that before the allocated date, all eligible Gambians will have their voter cards.
I don't think it will be necessary to extend the date, because currently, judging by the environment, most centers you visit are not quite busy, especially in the rural areas. Like, for example, where I am here in the North Bank region, most centers you go, you will find less than 20 people. So, in a sense, I would say that most people have been registered. But nonetheless, I know in the Comos, some areas are still experiencing high turnouts. And I would say, based on that fact, if need be, some of the teams which are less busy may be shifted to those high demanding areas. So based on that fact, again, I would say it may not be necessary to extend the voter registration exercise beyond the 11th of July, because I'm sure by which time all eligible Gambians would already have been registered.
Registration of voters begin every electoral cycle, where eligible citizens are provided with a voting ticket to vote for a candidate of their choice. The December 4th election is crucial, as it will be the first time that Gambians will elect a president without Jammeh as a candidate in about a quarter of a century. For iAfrica News, Aisata Chow.
Over 700,000 Gambians have been so far registered ahead of the December 4th presidential elections, as announced by the Gambia's Independent Electoral Commission. Now, the United Nations Food Agency has raised concerns over the growing level of food insecurity in South Sudan. By next month, more than 100,000 people are expected to be in a dire situation due to the lack of adequate food, according to the World Food Programme. Despite the government's continued strides, about 60% of the country's population could face food insecurity in 2021. Let's have more details of that in this report.
The World Food Programme says by next month, around 108,000 people in South Sudan are expected to be in level 5 famine classification, which is a catastrophe stage of food insecurity. The acute food shortage is mainly in the eastern and northern parts of the country.
The people of South Sudan are suffering from an accumulation of shocks over the last few years, whether it be climate change, with the 2 years of unprecedented flooding that the country has faced, whether it's economic decline caused by the depreciation of the South Sudanese pound, the very significant increase in the cost of food in the country, and of course what has happened because of COVID-19 in terms of the interruption to supply chains and that's impact on the cost of living in the country.
The United Nations says there is an increase in the level of intercommunal violence which is disrupting agriculture. It warns that unless the insecurity problem is resolved, the country will continue to experience food shortages. The World Food Programme says an estimated 7.2 million people, representing 60% of the country's population, are expected to face high levels of acute food insecurity this year. South Sudan's government says it is working to address the problem of insecurity and support agriculture development in the country. The government says it has signed an agreement with the World Bank worth $113 million to support farmers with supplies like fertilizers, ox plows and insecticides to fight desert locusts.
The government is turning to agriculture and other related ministries to see how they can support the country, how they can support the economy, how we can grow enough food, not just for ourselves, not just for our families, but enough food to sell and eventually to export to the neighboring countries.
The United Nations World Food Programme says it needs funds to provide tools and training for those facing food insecurity. The organization wants to help people recover from the shocks and promote resilience in South Sudan.
And from the report there in South Sudan, next to China we go. Now, Chinese on Thursday gathered at Tiananmen Square in Beijing to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party. Addressing the nation on the occasion, President Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the CPC, said they are getting closer to attainment of goals of set aside for China. Now, let's have details of that in this report by Amindao.
The Chinese Communist Party was founded in 1921 as both a political party and a revolutionary movement. A total of 12 delegates representing about 50 communist members nationwide secretly convened at the First National Congress in Shanghai in late July in that year. As a result of these political inventions, the 1st of July was designated as the anniversary of the founding of the party that is today on the mantle of leadership for the Asian powerhouse. The celebration that just began in Beijing is expected to last for 1 month to memorialize the founding 100 years ago of China's ruling Communist Party. President Xi Jinping has what he called attainments of goals or something closer to celebrate this year.
With history as a mirror to create a future, we must wage a great struggle characteristic of the contemporary times. Daring to struggle and daring to win is the invincible and powerful spiritual force of the CPC. To realize the great dream requires hard work and persistence. Today, we are closer than ever before to the goal of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, and we are more confident and more capable than ever to make the dream come true. But we must be well prepared to make more arduous and harder efforts.
He urged his people to know the new contradictions and new challenges stemming from the complicated international environment.
On the new journey ahead, we must enhance the sense of potential dangers and keep high vigilance in times of peace. We must implement a holistic approach to national security and make unified arrangements of development and security. We must make a unified arrangement of the whole strategic situation for realizing national rejuvenation and for coping with the century-rare changes in the world. We must be deeply aware of the new features and new requirements arising from the changes in the principal contradictions in our society. We must know the new contradictions and new challenges stemming from the complicated international environment. We must have the courage to fight and must be good at fighting, opening up new paths and building new bridges in front of obstacles so as to triumph over all risks and challenges.
According to the organization department of the CPC Central Committee, the party had more than 95 million members as of June 2021. Beijing's celebration began with a patriotic show at the Tiananmen Square with over 70,000 spectators from all walks of life. Helicopters and fighter jets flew overhead, hundreds of school children, party members, and frontline health workers. The congregation sang revolutionary songs like "Socialism is good," and "Without the Chinese Communist Party, there would be no new China." Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Amindao.
And from the report there on China's celebration of the Communist Party, marking 100 years of the party since the party was formed. Now, we will now take a break and come back shortly with the remainder of the story. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
The pride we take in our brand, the work we put into constantly change the landscape and elevate real estate in the Gambia, it's compared to none. From inception, our goal was to add value to the beautiful Gambian landscape. That's why we are proud innovators of community estates. Kololi Sands is an exceptional piece of work, tailored for ultimate convenience and luxury, to bring you an element of finesse that is rare but unique in its own. This is also our pride and joy, and we welcome you to the exquisite beauty right here in Kololi and right here on the waterfront. Kololi Sands, feel the ocean breeze at your doorstep.
Welcome back, and you're watching the World Today News Bulletin, and many thanks for joining us. Now, to matters of the National Assembly, because Gambian lawmakers summoned the Minister of Interior, Yankuba Sonko, to appear before the National Assembly to answer questions about the security-related matters. Now, key among them is the suspected case of 2 men who were killed in the community of Nyamina Dankunku and brutalized by unknown persons. Binti Jallo has the rest of that story in this report.
The Gambian Interior Minister appeared before the lawmakers last week to answer questions regarding cases of suspected murders. One of the questions was raised by the Nyamina East representative, Omar Sise. He asked the Interior Minister about the case of 2 men who were killed in the community of Nyamina Kudang and brutalized by unknown person. It could be recalled that Kudang police station received suspected murder cases and assault causing grievous bodily harm between August 2020 and February 2021. One of the suspected murder cases occurred on the 15th of August 2020. And the deceased was identified as one Guinean national called Nyancho, a suspected lunatic found lying in an unfinished building with bruises on the head and was taken to the Kudang Health Center where he was pronounced dead. The Interior Minister said no arrest was made and investigations are still ongoing. He further stated that in the second suspected murder case, which involved one Bambo Dabo's death, investigations are still ongoing. However, 4 individuals were arrested for being with the deceased on the night the alleged murder occurred. The third case involved one Keba Faye, a suspected lunatic also from Senegal. He was found laying with serious injuries on his jaw and was then rushed to the RVTH for treatment and later discharged. While answering questions from lawmakers at the National Assembly, the Interior Minister said they are doing everything possible to stop crimes in the country, adding that they have also introduced community policing to sensitize the citizenry.
Thank you very much. We have already developed the Gambia Police Force UNDP community policing strategy, and then it's in the high years at now, because the motivative aspect of it and encouragement aspect of it is going to be sponsored most likely by the UNDP, so that at least to facilitate their movement and also to organize forums where certain expenditures will be incurred and then can be paid for. Because if you need to go to communities, you have to sit with them. And the time that you sit with them, you have to at least cater something for them. At least during that, if it's refreshment or food for the time that they are going to be with you. So this is that's the strategy that we raised, and it's going to be supported by the UNDP. Thank you.
According to the minister, there was high increase in criminal activities in the country. Hence, they had to launch Operation Zero Crime to target criminal hideouts within the Greater Banjul areas and Kanifi Municipal Council. With the acquisition of more government funding, it was later expanded to other regions, and the positive outcome of the operation is the gradual decline of crime rate in the country. For iAfrica News, Binta Jallo.
Gambia's Interior Minister appeared before the National Assembly to respond concern of national security. Finally, to matters of the Africa CDC, because the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention has shown its dissatisfaction and disappointment with the European Union regarding access to COVID-19 vaccines. During its weekly press briefing on Thursday, the Africa CDC called on the EU to stay away from the policies that will complicate the fight against coronavirus. The CISE tells us more of that in this report.
Given the worrisome trajectory of COVID-19 vaccine distribution across the world, the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention is disappointed with the European Union for marginalization of the African continent. So far, about less than 1% of the African population has been vaccinated, thanks to unequitable distribution of vaccines globally. In what appears to be adding some salt into the injury, the European Union chose not to recognize vaccines administered in Africa, including the AstraZeneca, for travel pass within the EU. This move, according to the Africa CDC, might make vaccine provision for Africa even more harder, because the continent depends on these supplies under the WHO COVID-19 provision. In this light, the Director of Africa CDC, John Kensong, called on the European to do away with principles that will make it further difficult to fight COVID-19.
A vaccine that has been supported by the Europeans and supported by COVAX, supported by WHO, will not be allowed to be on the list of vaccines that were recognized through the Green Pass process in Europe. We've always said when this pandemic started, that we should always use science, data, to drive decisions. And I don't think this is one that was based on science and data, because if you look at the neutralizing antibody levels, which all these vaccines are generating against the spike protein, that the vaccine, that is the AZ vaccine produced in India, produces very high neutralizing antibodies. I think that is what, if they were producing less quality neutralizing antibodies, you probably argue that based on that, they are not fit to be recognized. So we are really calling on the European to stay away from such policies that will further undermine and make it difficult for us to fight this pandemic.
The zooming tough policies from the EU regarding global fight against COVID-19 appear to be a reminder of lessons learned that Africa cannot depend on countries for vaccine. John faced the pressure to assure that Africa can eliminate the pandemic by the end of next year, pending the availability of enough vaccines.
The fact of the matter is the EU has vaccine factories. It has vaccine production centers across Europe. Not a single dose, not one vial, has left a European factory for Africa. Okay, when we've gone to talk to their manufacturers, they tell us that they are completely maxed out, meeting the needs of Europe. we are referred to India, okay, where a number of manufacturers exist that are manufacturing vaccines like the AstraZeneca vaccine under license. Okay, so Europe has to decide. You can't say you support us. They have vaccinated so many of their own people that they can now watch football without masks. Okay, our people have not been vaccinated. Less than 1% of our population has been vaccinated.
Strive Masiwa, the coordinator of African Vaccine Acquisition Team, expressed Africa's disappointment with the European Union for the fact that not a single dose has left European factories for Africa.
First of all, let's remain optimistic that the efforts that people like Strive, Professor Benedict Orama, Dr. Vera Songwe, and others are doing, working every night and from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. To acquire these vaccines would yield fruits that we, in the next 12 months or so, we vaccinate at speed and at scale. If we do that, and the population cooperate, and I did share some information with you today on how much countries are using their vaccines, which is a very good indicator of that. If we have a predictable supply of vaccines, the vaccines will be used, then we can defeat this pandemic. We can break the backbone of this pandemic by the end of next year.
As of July 2021, 5.5 million COVID-19 cases have been reported across the continent. This figure accounts for 3% of the total cases reported globally. Over 142,000 Africans have died from the virus, while 4.8 million people have recovered since the start of the pandemic. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Daisy.
And that report there by Daisy brings this news edition to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, you can visit on our website on africa.tv. But we'll be back in about an hour's time for another news bulletin. But for now, though, many thanks for joining us, and thanks for watching, and bye for now.